I think we jump into it then. Let's talk this USL Division One news, right? Because recently there was news that broke that the USL had these aspirations of launching its own Division One league by 2027, similar to the setup of NWSL and the USL Super League in the women's game to rival MLS. And CEO Alec Papadakis stated that their ambition was to grow the game at the top level by bringing it to more cities across the world and building what he called a more sustainable and vibrant soccer ecosystem in the United States. While noble, of course, and one that sparked interest in the soccer community at large, they still have to meet a lot of U.S. soccer's pro league standards, including stadium size, owner net worth, populations of cities, and the list goes on, right? Redundant as it may be. But I wanted to start just by getting your thoughts on what you thought about when this news broke, and if this is something you want to happen, or do you want it not to happen? Like, where do you stand on this?
I love the idea that there are going to be professional teams in more cities, in more towns. Love that. 100% love that. I used to work for an ECHL hockey club, which would be, third division. So there's the NHL, there's the AHL, and then ECHL would be on a level with the USL. I mean, it all turns into a thing like, well, this league is more like, grown men beer fighting.
Right.
I love lower level in quotes teams. I want to see more soccer teams in more cities. I would love to see JSFC, Jersey Shore FC, playing in a professional stadium one day. That's my brother's team in New Jersey.
Nice.
I'm sure everybody already knew that, but I'm just saying. I do think that immediately when they brought it up, everybody immediately jumps to, well, are they going to have pro rel? I mean, we got to have pro rel, right? We're going to do pro rel. Slow down.
Yeah.
They have got a mountain to climb if they really want to be a first division specified league. And you talked about some of the laws. This is what I spent my lunch break researching today,
Yeah.
looking at all the things they would have to do to make that happen. I don't want to say it's unrealistic. Who am I to, you know, downplay someone's dream? But there are a lot of things that they are nowhere close to.
Yeah. I mean that is one of the things that popped out to me, right? Like I love the ambition because I always thought that this country had this appetite for football. Like they're the one of the arguments against this whole closed ecosystem and everything needs to be in a million person city and all this stuff is like everything else is already there. Right. So you're fighting against four other sports in certain areas to try and get relevancy, where then you pop up in a place like Cincinnati and boom, you blow up, right? So if you went to more places that weren't saturated with other sports, you might have a better chance at it. And I always thought that was a really, really solid foot to stand on, right? So I think expanding the game, especially in the first division to more cities, is always a good thing. And do I want it to happen? I don't see why it's a bad thing, right? Like you just mentioned, the growth is good, right? And one of the things, and we're going to talk about this later, is competition breeds improvement, right?
Yes.
MLS salary caps, which we're going to hit on later, they've been, I'm going to use the term stagnant for years. Yeah, they've been increasing steadily for a decade or whatever, but it's clearly not been enough, right? Toss USL in the backyard, and it's like, oh, we've got 14 teams that are rivaling you, and we got all the, we've got Louisville City who is pulling 60K a game, like, oh, we're gonna be legit. Well, now MLS like, okay, well, how do we combat that? Well, we got to let these people bring in more players who people are going to want to watch, right? So now you start doing this kind of like balancing act of how do we keep ourselves ahead of the person in front of them, and it's a rising tide that raises all boats, right? So I don't, and I'm sure some people be like, oh, like it's weird because you're gonna have two first divisions and you're gonna be fighting each other and that might make it worse, but I see it as making it better.
It would make it better if it were possible.
Yeah,
And again, I'm sure they have a plan for this, but can we just talk about what they would have to do to make that happen?
we absolutely
So,
can, because the next section is actually the question, will it happen? Is it possible? So please go on.
all right. So just a few of the things that I saw. A D1 league has to have 12 teams or more. By the third year, they have to have 14. No problem, right? USL already has a second division league. They've got a third division league. They can come up with 14 teams, no sweat. They have to have three time zones represented, specifically Eastern time, Central time, and Pacific time. So I guess screw Utah, right? I don't
I
know
never got why they
why.
skipped out that one.
We don't care if you have a team in Mountain Time or not, but you better have the other three.
That never
That
made
bothers
sense.
me, U.S. soccer. I feel about, I'm going to say 22% as angry as when New York Red Bulls took the New Jersey out of their name. 22.5% possible.
That's significant.
75% of the teams have to be in metropolitan markets of a million or more. I don't hate that. I don't love it, but
Mhm.
I get that you want to make it sustainable. Here's the first one where I see that I just see it as such a huge obstacle that I'm like, why are we even talking about this? All of the stadiums have to be enclosed, fully enclosed, and have a 15,000 plus capacity. Now, of the all the teams in the USL, do you know how many teams can meet that standard right now?
I thought four. That was my guess. Just off the top of my head, I was rattling them off. I picked Detroit, Sacramento, Phoenix, and Louisville were the ones that kind of popped off to me.
Okay. I was going to give you a ton of credit for saying Louisville correctly 5 minutes ago, but
And
you just
I
said
messed it up
Louisville.
now. I do it. I flip flop all the time because I was in Lexington for so long, and I
Right.
started with Louisville, and they're like, "No, it's Louisville." I'm like, "Okay, I'll get there," but it's still half and half for me.
We're going to have to edit that out before my wife listens to this podcast. It's Louisville, Miami, and Birmingham.
Really?
So three of the USL teams can meet that standard. And remember, we need to have 12 teams to start,
Yeah.
and we eventually need to have 14. So right now we only have three. Two of them, Miami and Birmingham, share their stadium with, get this, a college football team. Now, can another nine teams do the same thing? Yes, absolutely. But if you're telling me your Division One league is playing on football lines, I'm going to tell you right now that I hate that with the
Hmm.
burning intensity of 1,000 white hot suns. So, will I get over it? Yes. Is that probably what they're going to do? It's the only thing I could think of on my lunch.
Yeah.
There are other financial things that they have to meet. They have to have staff. They have to have a broadcast contract. And I guess to me, before we talk about anything else, how do I watch the teams that you have now? If I want to watch the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, and I do, I love
Mhm.
watching that team. If I want to watch the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and I do, I used to go to those games all the time. Jacksonville Armada, I'm not sure they're even still in existence. But with all these streaming devices, all these streaming services that we have, how do I watch your games? Because one of the things that irritates me to no end, check out my ability to self edit even after a 12 and a half hour shift. One of the things that irritates me when I want to watch an NWSL game, it's always an adventure.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out where to watch it. People complain about the Apple paywall. I don't hate it. I love watching championship football on ESPN Plus. If I want to watch Bundesliga, I know I can go to ESPN Plus. It's something that they need to do, and I hope they do it correctly. When this happens, and I think it's going to happen eventually, when they figure out everything else, I hope they pick one paywall, one broadcast, not the NWSL shotgun.
Hmm.
Make a ton of money. I get it. It's a business. One paywall. So I know where I can go to get your product.
Man, that was one of the things I always heard people were like, USL has such a better way to watch it. And I'm like, it's on five different networks at 12 different times. I can never figure out which one it's on. And even when it is, half the time I don't have the streaming service. The other half it's on linear cable, which I don't have anymore because I'm not paying $90 a month for cable. Like I've got everything else I need. So it really doesn't because I've got one spot I can go here, but that's a completely different story and I totally get it. But that for me that was the idea that I had this handful of clubs that probably met the requirements and like you mentioned they can hop into football stadiums and do all that whole thing no problem. But what I actually saw them, and this is me, I'm going to put my hand up. I'm not an expert on this, so I know you did your research. You can correct me if there are people in the comments that can correct me as well. There are these like territory rights that exist where you can only set up within a certain geographic number, like relation to other teams. and you have to be in cities of over 1 million people population, right? So that instantly limits your geographic range to a set number of places. One, are there enough? And two, does it make sense for you? Like, are there places that you can actually grow and be a part of, right? And I'm assuming that if they're going to do this, they've done their planning, right? They're not dumb people. They've done their planning. They say, okay, we can make it work here, 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 here. But are they going to uproot like teams that don't fit there and move them somewhere else? Are they going to look for outside investors? Like, what does that look like? And that kind of leads me to the next question is like, what does this impact in US soccer feel like? Is it a change of the landscape in terms of team locations? Is it a change of kind of the whole outline of the pro league standards? Like, what are we going to see after this, if this happens after it happens?
So I guess my question, philosophically, romantically, however you want to define I would say love affair. My wife would say obsession with this sport. She's not unfair when she says that. When I watch Premier League, and then lately, I've been watching a lot of Hull City in the championship. I can immediately tell the difference. So if I'm watching Ipswich versus, Brentford, not picking on anybody, or Ipswich versus Southampton, I can still tell a difference between that and when I watch a championship game match. There is a difference in the style of play. There's a difference in the way that the matches are reffed. And then you go down the first division and it's the same thing. I love watching championship matches. It is a dirty, dirty pleasure for me. I don't know that I can tell the difference between the USL Championship and the USL League One. With a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you where the teams I like to watch, and I named a few of them. I
Mhm.
couldn't tell you which league they belong to. So if we're bringing in a first division, is there a really solid point to it? What is it going to give that you don't already have, other than we're first division now? And if that's what it is, that's fair. But why are we doing it first? You think you're going to compete with MLS? I'm sorry, but you're not. They're too far out in front. It's going to be decades before you can attack it. So what's the point?
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. So I had this idea that it was like so I always have I've been kind of preaching this idea that every time you talk about impact on soccer in America, it's always from two avenues, right? General like fan interest of just the game itself, the Premier League, World Cup. Like how does soccer impact it from that side of it? And then how do you impact somebody as a fan to get them into the game, right? So you break it down into okay, you've got your casual fan that only watches the Premier League, you've got your casual fan that only tunes in during the World Cup, you've got your diehard fans of MLS, you've got your general soccer fans who will watch everything that moves as long as it's got a ball that you're kicking to it, and then you've got your I hate MLS, I'm only going to watch lower league soccer, and or I hate MLS, I'm only going to watch European soccer, right? Like there are these different aspects of it, and to me, like the biggest market that you can get are casuals who only really know about European soccer or the World Cup, or the people who don't even know it exists like at all, like general like football, basketball people, right? If you are going to obviously it's going to open up like this whole new aspect of what American soccer can be. There are going to be tons of avenues that you can take, and that's and endless possibilities, right? But if people are sitting here and we're like, and I'll use the European based people who are like, oh, MLS is too American. There are salary caps and no pro rel and all this other stuff. How are you going to get them to buy into your league when you say you're a second first division? You're going to blow their heads off. Like, what do you mean second first division? There's only one Premier League. There's only one Bundesliga. There's only one Serie A. Like, how can you have two first divisions? You guys are just you guys are Mickey Mouse leagues and blah blah blah. And you're going to go down the whole rabbit hole, right? So, in terms of the impact on the U.S. soccer landscape, is it going to make as much of a difference as we would anticipate it would over the general population? Maybe you're hitting more cities and towns and you're expanding it in that sense, sure. But for the people who are already in those areas who are just Premier League fans and hate American soccer because it's not European, you almost might drive them the other way. So I'm really interested to see how that lays itself out, if it's a net negative, net positive, or just cancels each other's out, you know?
I mean, I've struggled for years to get one of my brothers. When I lived in Florida, one of my brothers lived down there also. We lived in the same town. And I couldn't get him to watch the US national team with me because he grew up, his best friend was straight over from Liverpool. If it wasn't Liverpool or it wasn't the English national team, then it was crap.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would watch a US game and I'd be like, okay, I hear you because I watch those teams too. Getting him to start watching the US national team took me paying him to drive our van to a US game so that we could all drink and taking him on the march with American Outlaws into the stadium.
Yeah.
So and then when he saw the passion, when he saw the singing and the dancing and the tifos and everything else, then he was like, wow, you guys are actually into this. And I'm like, yes, we are a real soccer culture.
Mhm.
We are not your soccer culture. We're not like Liverpool. Our song isn't 100 years old, but we have our thing. I do think that there are some fans you will never get,
Yep.
right? There are people who live in the States, but they will only watch Liga MX. Last I heard, Liga MX gets more viewership in the United States still than the Premier League.
Yeah, I think it's very close, if not still there. Yeah.
And they've certainly been number one for years and years. And I was blown out of the water the first time I heard that. So that's fine. You got to get the next generation. So that just begs another question. Are you going to be financially sustainable until that next generation has disposable income? Right. So then where do you put these teams? We go back to your question. The reason that the Florida Everblades, which was the hockey team that I was a fan of and then eventually worked for, the reason that they could pay me to be their public address announcer was because they had 7,000 fans every single night. 7,000 people who were born in other parts of the country, moved down to Florida, retired, and missed hockey. And there was nothing else to do in this town except go to the stadium and watch hockey. But now you need to put a 15,000 person stadium in this town, and there has to be a million people there, and you have to be far enough away from any other geographical area. I'd like to see them succeed. I
Oh
really
yeah.
would. I just